I'd like to talk to you about posture. So before we discuss good posture, it's important to know that there are three components of the spine. There's the cervical spine, which goes from C1 down to C7. There's the thoracic spine, which goes from T1 to T12. And there's the lumbar spine, which goes from L1 to L5. But what's good range of motion for each of these? Normal range of motion of the neck, the cervical spine, is 80 to 90 degrees of rotation, looking over the right or the left shoulder, a 80 to 90 degrees of flexion, chin to chest, with 70 degrees of extension, looking to the ceiling, and 45 degrees of lateral flexion, left ear or right ear to shoulder. So one more time, about 90 degrees ability to look over each of the shoulders, 90 degrees in terms of chin to chest, only 70 degrees of extension, and about 45, half of 90, of lateral flexion. Now when we get to the thoracic spine, those vertebrae are connected to the rib cage, and so there's a little less mobility there. But you still need a lot of mobility here in order to take some stress off the lower back. And that's where people lose a lot of their mobility as they go into a kyphosis. So a normal kyphosis is only about to 50 degrees of forward flexion. And then you also want to maintain about 30 to 50 degrees of rotation in seated with the lumbar spine locked out. So to test that, you put somebody sitting down, flex the lumbar spine so that it can't move, and then check rotation and see if they can get to 30 to 50 degrees. We have a golfer's rotation in our app where they're in a bit of extension, and you keep your hand on their lower back and you check and see how much rotation they can get from the rib cage. 30 to 50 degrees of rotation, like that. 50 degrees of kyphosis. There's not a great number on how much extension you should be able to get from the thoracic spine. Now, when we get to the lumbar spine, those 5 vertebrae at the bottom of the spine, there's actually only supposed to be 25 degrees of extension, 60 degrees of flexion, as if to come forward and touch the toes, and only 13 degrees of rotation. So this is the part of the spine that really isn't built to twist. 13 degrees, if we think of 90 degrees, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 13 degrees is very, very little rotation. So the rest of the spine, the cervical, the thoracic, is what really should be twisting you. There should be very little, if any, twist in the lumbar spine. And this is where people get into trouble. When they forward flex and rotate, they tend to damage the discs in their lumbar spine. So we want to make sure with our posture work, we get the chest up, the thoracic spine a little bit straighter so that rotation can be restored there. We also want to make sure the neck muscles stay loose so that you keep the cervical rotation, which takes the pressure off the lower back from having to do that rotation. And we'll go through that in our posture series.